I thought long and hard before deciding to make this video. I've seen the glowing reviews and it can be hard going against the tide of opinions, but I decided, what the hell. Final Fantasy XVI, with all its flaws, has fantastic moments that actually took my breath away. So please, this is not some hit piece. It is just that for so much I liked, there is so much I hated. So here's my review of Square Enix Flawed masterpiece 6 months later. I want to start with a very strong disclaimer. I am a casual Final Fantasy fan. I've played previous entries, but I can't compare myself to my friend Raul. So I want everyone to understand I have no real emotional connection to this franchise. I don't hear the soundtrack and remember how it got me through a breakup in 03, or see a Chocobo and feel all warm and fuzzy inside. If you ask me, they look like they would make a really nice stew. References will fly over my head, locations will mean nothing to me, and characters are judged based on what they bring to the table and not if they are connected to some grand mythos. Did you catch my pun? I am reviewing this game from a casual perspective, so I apologize in advance if I fail to acknowledge something. Without further ado, here's my review of Final Fantasy XVI. And if you're new here, please go ahead and subscribe. But I would definitely settle for a like and a comment. I really appreciate all the support, everyone. Can you imagine we are closing in on 1,000 subscribers? I always like to start at performance. I played Final Fantasy at launch, but in order to make this review, I replayed it all over again. And I would like to commend Sony on how literally bug-free they launch all their games. I think the last bug Sony exclusive was Days Gone at launch. Not all PlayStation exclusives will be critical or commercial successes, but I can assure you, you damn well will not fall through the floor or have a mission bug out on you. And I don't think people give Sony enough credit for this, especially in this we will fix it after launch landscape. Final Fantasy XVI ran buttery smooth with little to no dips, even in the most intensive fight. Let's go ahead and talk about the story. This review is relatively spoiler free, but you can go ahead and skip to this part of the video that's showing on your screen to avoid any major spoilers. Final Fantasy XVI story is about a rivalry between nations in the land of Valisthea over the distribution of a rare resource called Mother Crystals. The nations are Rosaria, the Iron Kingdom, Walud, the Dalmatian Empire, and Sambrek. I just love that word, you know. Sambrek. I could say it all day long. I don't know, I think I just love words that are spelled one way and pronounced another. Well, these nations all have dominants. People who can channel Eikons. Eikons are basically Godzilla-sized spirits that each nation uses as a nuclear weapon. Honestly, Final Fantasy XVI is basically the plot of Naruto. There are Jinchurikis or dominants who have bijus in them, or icons that are controlled by villages who use them as a way to tip the balance of power. Sounds familiar? Hey, I can even liken Ultima to Kaguya. I liked the story of Final Fantasy XVI, but it falls into the same trap that, funny enough, happened to Naruto, which is having some unknown entity pulling the strings. I don't know why people write stories like this. It never works. It sounds cool in concept, having some villain absent for 80% of the plot pulling the strings only to appear at the end. It makes people feel like you did not have faith in the characters you spent the entire story building around. To be fair, Final Fantasy actually tried to solve this by introducing Ultima early enough in the story so as not to have the rug pulled out from under us. But the problem is, I don't know Ultima. I don't care for Ultima, and having an exposition dump at the end of the game to explain his actions will not change that feeling. But do you know who I care for? I care for Kupka, the dominant of Titan, who is influencing Dalmatian policies and has a bone to pick with Sid and Clive for killing his lover, the dominant of Garuda. I care about Bahamut, who had his kingdom infiltrated by Clive's she-devil mother and had the throne taken away from him. And I care about Odin, who honestly just looks freaking cool riding on Sleipnir and should have probably been the main villain. I really love how deep and expansive the story of Final Fantasy XVI is, and it was really easy to follow, especially with in-game historians that can recap the story at their request with timeline details. The world of Final Fantasy consists of segmented open worlds, and how do I put this with some tact? I hated the world of Final Fantasy XVI. I remember playing Final Fantasy XV, and it is basically 4 bros looking cool with their leather jackets cruising around in an incredibly empty world. Well, Square Enix thought the way to fix this was by dumping the open world for something, a little bit smaller and could be more controlled. The locations in Final Fantasy XVI, although look a lot more beautiful, have densely packed populations and incredibly vibrant, they still feel kind of empty. The areas in Final Fantasy XVI almost act as mission givers, and once I'm done getting the mission, I have absolutely no intention to revisit that area. There is nothing to see in the environment, and everything just feels so restrictive and bogged down with so many invisible walls and barriers that navigation can be an absolute chore. I am an architect, and a lot of the design of the environment feels like it is deliberately confusing. Once a mission ends and I return to the main hub, I gnash my teeth, knowing the working involved in getting to all the NPCs that are tucked away in annoying areas. Sometimes when I go too far in the main hub, I will actually just open the map and fast travel just to avoid the trek back in this snake-like maze. Thank God for the PS5 speed. The merchants also feel incredibly useless in all these areas because the weapons they sell are either always underpowered or their wares are the same, so there is no need to even interact with inhabitants of any area apart from the main hub. I always like to judge a game's world by how it reacts with the player and vice versa. But the world of Final Fantasy XVI almost feels like a beautiful backdrop that does absolutely nothing. And because it's not an open world, it can feel really disjointed. It is so sad seeing a beautiful monument in the distance only for the game to insist you have to fast travel there. I also found myself getting lost a lot. Not because the environments were so complicated or something like that. They were really majorly straight roads or very, very linear corridors. But it's because the design language of the areas can be so repetitive. I found myself going towards doors and gates hoping that the X button pops out, especially when you get into these mini dungeon areas. This brings me to the next thing, and that is side missions. Where do I even begin? It is essentially a triangle. Collect mission from A, go to point B, get redirected to point C, where you kill some enemies and boom, mission over. They are so uninspired, and it is sad because some of them have some truly touching story moments. Let me give you an example of a side mission. I found some kids in the main hub who had broken a pendulum, and it looked fascinating. I was like, alright, a cute mini game puzzle should appear so that I can put the pendulum back together. Nope. Select some buttons and keep it moving, bro. Why do you need to do this, Square Enix? Just make Final Fantasy Devil May Cry. This game could have been spectacular if it just consisted of mission to mission curated hand-holding action, and then each stage ends with a phenomenal Eikon boss fight. Why add all this busy work? On a side note, I really did like the creature bounties. You can collect those all around the open world, and they were really fun, especially when you encounter them randomly in open areas. It was the one thing that made the world feel a little bit alive to me. The open world in Final Fantasy was never the issue. In fact, if you'd ask me, I think they should go back to it. The problem is insisting of games having so much bloat so that playtimes can be padded. It sounds like Sony promised Square Enix a bonus if the game can hit 100 hours playtime. I just feel, go in on the hand holding. You were already kind of doing that in the game, so just make a bombastic cinematic God of War with Final Fantasy characters and it will be perfect. I am glad I can finally talk about the best thing in the game. That's the combat. I loved the combat of Final Fantasy XVI. It is easily the best thing about the game by far. I love that fast it is and how you can mix and match your powers based on your play style. I would usually start a fight with Garuda's wind attack, and then I switch to Phoenix fire attack, and then while the animation is running, I will have my Titan defense ready. It was so intoxicating managing spells in battles with builds. Really make the character your own. It was so much fun running through all the paths, figuring which one stuns the enemy faster, which was the best attack to use during these stun animations, when to pop up your icon mode. And talking about icons, wow, They were all incredibly unique. If I was fighting ads, I would make sure I had Garuda and Phoenix because they were really good at crowd control. If I was fighting a boss, I would make sure I had Titan for its parry and its blocking abilities. The enemy variety was also excellent. You fight a vast array of different enemies with unique fight patterns. Fighting the Eikons can be a whole game on its own. I have never felt a rush of power this intense since maybe OG God of War, and getting to fight them was really incredible. I loved how every dominant kind of mirrors their Eikon's personality. And is it just me, or does the Titan Eikon look like the Armored Titan? I don't know. Some Eikon's fights will actually even devolve into like a mini game experience. It was also, I loved every second of it. I'm telling you, if Final Fantasy could just cut out everything, just leave the action and the Eikon boss fight. Look, Square Enix, you can either be Witcher or you can be DMC, but you definitely can be both. So choose one and we'll be fine with either. On a side note, I need to ask Square Enix a question. Is this the route they want to go with the combat of its mainline games? I know the turn-based system was being tweaked for something new and actiony, but I think they had actually struck a good balance with the Final Fantasy VII Remake combat. Look, I love the cool bombastic action of 16 to remain, but give us a little bit of party control. I know there is a bit of it with Toggle, but I would have liked to start a fight by maybe freezing an enemy with Jill, then switch to Clive, and then maybe back to Jill. Either way, Final Fantasy combat is still pretty damn good in my book. I really think Final Fantasy is the best entry point for any newcomer to the franchise. Its borrowing of some major gaming trend has made it feel very familiar and easy to get into, but the problem is a lot, and I mean a lot, of all the major gaming trends are annoying, and honestly, I hope they would have died off with this generation. I get it. Who the hell do you think you are? IGN said the game is great. GameSpot said the game is great. Every major YouTuber I respect said it's great. It was nominated at the Game Awards. Who are you, a small YouTuber with a weird accent, trying to tell me otherwise? And the simple truth is, I agree. Final Fantasy is a good game. Heck, maybe there's even a great game in there, but so much redundancy almost buried a gem of an experience. Those Eikon battles can be movies. In fact, sometimes they can be so over the top I won't be able to see what is happening on screen, but I will just love every second of it. Final Fantasy XVI is definitely 2 steps in the right direction over Final Fantasy XV, but it still feels bogged down by the dead weight. This game would have been perfect if Square Enix could just splice out all the redundancies and leave us with the meat of the experience. And it's just scary that Square Enix's most profitable franchise still hasn't really forged a definitive path going forward. I really do believe in them, and just how they learned lessons from Final Fantasy XV and course corrected, I think they should learn from Final Fantasy XVI and make a definitive Final Fantasy XVII. Please, if you like what you saw, please consider supporting the devs and buying Final Fantasy XVI. And if you like what you heard, please consider liking and subscribing. Here are some other videos you might like. Eyes out. Peace.